S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are in the book of Colossians, and last week we made it about halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through chapter 2. So we've got the end of chapter 2 and 3 and 4 to pick up this week, and then we'll be done. It's a short letter.
Right.
And so we don't want to stretch it out too long and lose the context.
Yeah, exactly. 4 chapters, like we said, we started last week. We had a good intro last week. We're not going to, redo the whole intro. But Paul was in Rome at this time under house arrest, and he wrote a letter to this church that he didn't start.
Yeah.
Maybe he taught the person who did start the church. We're not exactly sure, but it kind of seems like it fits in nicely that way.
Yeah.
And this church was doing some great things, and they were having problems with false teachers too.
Yeah.
So must have been pretty dramatic there too. So Paul at least got wind of it somehow, and wrote this letter. So we're already through the intro. We saw what he was doing. Last week we spent a lot of time on the supremacy of Christ, and then right after that, Paul talked about, hey, here's my model for being a minister and a pastor, and what I'm trying to do, and how I go about doing things. And it seems like it would make a lot of sense for the Christian leaders there to pick up on this and to be able to use this information to combat against false prophets.
Yeah. And where we're picking up today, or in this week rather, is in chapter 2:16. He's starting with, therefore, don't do this. Well, where does this come from? This comes from the doctrine that he's been teaching in the first couple of chapters.
Part, right.
Because of this stuff that's true, don't get, he says in 2:8, don't get captivated with this empty, deceitful philosophies of humans.
Yeah.
And now he's going to enumerate a few of these things that they were wrestling with.
Well, and we still are today.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he basically says don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
As part of it. That's easier said than done, isn't it? People were making a big deal about things that weren't necessarily doctrine.
Right.
What foods do we need to eat? Do we celebrate the new moon? Should we not? Is it bad to celebrate the new moon?
Yep.
Which day is the Sabbath?
Yep.
Those are some pretty big things.
Yeah.
But Paul's like, don't sweat those things. But be very concerned about the things that you need to be concerned about, the doctrinal things.
Yeah. I love the fact in verse 17, he says, these are only the shadow of the things to come, but the reality is Christ. So he ties them back to chapter 1. He says, don't forget who Christ is. We can get so caught up in all this other stuff that we forget the big picture. Now, some people are going to be tempted to say, aha, I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Right. I just have to know a few things, or I don't have to study it all, or none of this matters.
Big stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's a saying. It's often attributed to Augustine or Aquinas, or it's actually a guy by the name of Rupert something, I think, in the Middle Ages.
Rupert?
Yeah, something.
You're on a first name basis?
I don't even remember his name. Yeah. Nobody knows his name. It's attributed to everybody else. Yeah. But you've probably heard it before. It says, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. Right? So in those things that are essential, in those essential doctrines, we should be unified. In things that aren't essential, believe what you want. But in all things, make sure that we do it in love. And it sounds really good. But who gets to decide
which is which? Which is
which, right? So some people take that and say, well, the salvation is the only thing it's really matters. We should be unified on that. The rest of the stuff doesn't matter. I think Paul would make that first circle a little bit bigger.
Yeah, right.
We've got to have healthy doctrine, because healthy doctrine is what unites us,
right,
but it's also what divides us. It tells us what things are okay and what's not. And that's what he's dealing with here. It looks like, food or drink, not a big deal. Unless you're coming out from under the Mosaic law.
Right.
Now it's a doctrinal thing.
You. Yeah, exactly.
What about the feasts? Do I have to go to Passover? Do I have to go to this? Do I have to go to that? Who's it a big deal for? Sabbath day, who's it a big deal for? There's always a Jewish contingent within these churches.
Right.
And so Paul is trying to navigate Jews and Gentiles.
Right. And they're, from their standpoint, they're pushing what they know and what they grew up with.
Right.
Versus something new.
Right.
So, man, it had to be hard.
Yep. And that's
Just
why,
wading through all
and
this.
that's why he keeps pushing back. Here is what you've got to know, because knowing this is going to help you live properly, and you're not going to get swayed and deceived, and all this stuff.
So, also in the same section here, we find out there seems to be angel worshiping going on.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
We don't really see that anywhere else in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Now, Jewish tradition actually does elevate angels, like not to the level of God. They don't worship angels, but they highly respect angels. Right. And it seems like it's possible that was, even if the Jews
Elevated.
weren't doing it, yeah,
Yeah, I got it.
even if around them maybe was, yeah.
Yeah, but we always kid when we say angels, because everybody's on their bellies, and the angels saying, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah.
But the next thing they say is, "No, don't worship me."
Don't worship me. Don't worship me.
Almost as much as they say, "Do not be afraid."
Yeah.
So,
Which, by the
it
way,
had to come from the outside.
fun fact: in the Old Testament, we see this person pop up every once in a while called the angel of the Lord, usually the angel or the messenger of the Lord. He actually accepts worship.
Well,
So that tells us a
we
little
think
something.
we think he's a little something different.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's the pre-incarnate Christ,
Right.
the eternal Son before he became Jesus.
Right.
If he were an angel, he shouldn't be accepting
Yeah,
worship, right?
right.
But he does regularly. So it tells us a little something about him.
Yeah. So Paul seems to be saying, like with the angel worship, this isn't one of those little things. This is the kind of thing you do need to worry about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the verse 18 here. The person who does this goes on at great lengths about what he has supposedly seen, right?
Yeah.
And he's puffed up and, all these empty notions. These people who claim to have visions, claim to have... what I find really interesting is that Mormonism, Islam are two of the biggest religions in the world that are founded based on somebody seeing a vision of an angel.
Yeah.
And Paul says, what you've supposedly seen, don't get sucked into that. Islam and Mormonism.
Nice.
Verse 21, why, to 20 and 21, why are you submitting to these things? Don't touch, don't eat, don't drink, don't handle, don't... It's like, that's not the point here.
Right.
That's not the point here. These are all destined to perish, and it comes back. Again, the reality is Christ. Therefore, chapter 3, live in Christ.
Right, and that's where he's going with
That's
3.
where he heads it.
And it's kind of funny because you may recognize a lot of things here in chapter 3 because they're definitely repeated in some of his letters.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely more encouragement to Christians, talking about Christ. Hey, keep seeking him, keep thinking about him, be with him, because this is happening, put to death your sin nature. The whole old man, new man thing comes up here.
Which is an overlap with Ephesians. And we said last week that Ephesians and Colossians does have a lot of overlap. And that's another one of those places where they overlap, because Ephesians 4, and then Ephesians 4 has some of the same stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I like in verses 12 through 17, there's a solid prayer in there that Paul has, building up Christians. I'm not going to read it all.
Yeah, but how we're supposed to live, right?
Exactly. And it's like, wow.
What's interesting is that this is written in plural, so it's y'all. It's sort of a community-based thing. So it's not just, okay, you as an individual Christian do these things, but you as a church, as a congregation, let these things be true about you in your community. And of course, in order for them to be true in community, they have to be true individually.
Right.
But that's the...
Right, so he has that first section, like you just said, building up the individual person, also the church, and then he goes into the next section, which is more building up the household.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting.
Or your secular life, right?
Yeah, he kind of hits each one, and it's actually positions within the household too.
Yeah.
Because it's a husband do this, wives do this, fathers do that. It's like, wait, that's the same, but it's a different role.
Yeah, it's a different role.
Exactly.
Yeah, children, and then slaves and masters. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of those, hey, whatever you're doing, do it with enthusiasm.
Yep.
For the God.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as working as to the Lord and not for people, verse 23. At the end of verse 24, there's an interesting Greek thing that I wanted to point out.
Okay.
Because in Koine Greek, there's what's called an indicative verb and an imperative verb. Indicative just means it's sort of like the declarative, just that it's just, here's what it is. It's just a statement, right? Yeah. Imperative is usually a command when it's from a superior to an inferior. Usually the form is different enough you can look at it and say, okay, that's this, that's this, that's this. Not a problem. Occasionally they have the exact same form. Exactly the same. And you can't tell just by looking at the word, is this a statement or is this a command?
Okay.
And we have one of those at the end of verse 24. In the net, it translates it as a command. Serve the Lord Christ. But in some other translations, in some of the other translations, it translates it the other way. You are serving the Lord Christ. So you have to look which way. I like it from the command standpoint. I think it builds up, do it to the Lord and not for people, because you know that you're receiving your inheritance from the Lord as a reward. Serve the Lord Christ.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, serve.
At the end, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I really like it as a command. But if you have a translation where it says you are serving the Lord Christ, that's why. Because it's the exact same form. You just can't look at the word and tell.
Good, nice. So then we get in chapter 4. In chapter 4, the last chapter, like a lot of Paul's letters, sometimes we gloss over it. Right, he's already had the doctor, and he's already had the application, and 4 he's thanking people, and who's taking this letter, and that definitely happens in here, but take some time with it. What I really liked is Paul asks the Colossians to pray for him, and this is cool for a number of reasons. First, Paul does need people praying for him, right? He is in prison in Rome. He believes he's going to be fine, but prayers are always a good thing. And then second, I think it gives the church a purpose. Hey, we have a job to do. Mm-hmm. We're helping this guy.
Yeah.
And I think that was so cool, especially since he asked for it too. And there's a responsibility when somebody asks, hey, pray for me. Sometimes it's just an offhand comment, but I think we need to take it a little more serious. And it's a job and something to work for.
Well, and if they have never met him, but they're obviously grateful for his ministry through Epaphras and getting the gospel, he's inviting them into his ministry. You haven't met me, you haven't seen me, but you can be a part of what I'm doing for somebody else. Yeah, and that's
how
huge.
Cool is that? Right.
I like verses 5 and 6 because a lot of the New Testament is one another's and building up one another's and all this. Here he says, make sure, here's how you live with people who are not one another's. They're outside of your congregation. They're outside of the faith. So how are we supposed to engage with them? He says, live with wisdom. Live with wisdom toward those who are outside. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer everyone. How do we respond to the unbelievers in our lives? We should respond with grace and wisdom.
Yeah.
So that when we talk about 1 Peter 3 a lot, when the opportunity arises,
be ready.
We know how to answer.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good. And I like the clarification of the church and unbelievers as a separate, just back to the path, right?
Yep.
step 7 and 8 in there.
Yeah, so chapter 3, there's your church community, how you live with each other. Chapter 4, here's a couple of thoughts about everybody else.
Yeah. So a bunch of names in there too. Luke shows up in there.
Yep. Barnabas, Mark. We've seen these guys before. Yep.
Yeah. So great. So cool letter, like we said, short, but interesting from the standpoint of a lot of things packed in there, and still applicable to us today.
Very, very much. Stay strong in your doctrine. Live it out, not just know it in your head. Here's how you live as a community, and here's how you live with those outside your community.
Yeah.
And there's chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. It took 2 weeks.
Maybe I should read it again.
Well, hopefully you found this beneficial. We really enjoy Colossians. We enjoy a lot of these as we do them. We hope you do too. And as you find things that are beneficial, we'd love to hear the things that you pick up that we didn't talk about, and your big takeaways, and the things that you're sharing with other people as well. We'd love to hear about those. Just let us know. And next time, we will come back with a brand new book. Ooh. And we're not going to tell you what it is yet. We'll tell you next time.
See you. Bye.